He announced my retirement to the whole shop floor. I walked out, and 71 of my 86 active clients walked out behind me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Tuesday morning, 9:15 a.m. I'm at my bench, grinding the scroll ends on a balcony railing for a hotel project in Asheville. I've got my respirator pushed up on my forehead and a half-cold cup of black coffee sitting on the ledge behind me. The shop smells the way it always smells. Hot steel, cutting oil, old concrete dust that never fully settles, no matter how many times you sweep. Bryce Kavanaugh steps up onto the riser near the loading dock. He likes elevation. Makes him feel like he's addressing troops, I think, though the closest he's ever been to a formation is a marketing seminar at the University of Tennessee. He's 25 years old. He's wearing a quarter-zip pullover and clean boots that have never touched slag. He's got a clipboard he doesn't need because there's nothing on it. He wrote himself. Hey everyone! Quick huddle! 12 shop guys. 3 office staff. Everyone stops what they're doing because when the owner's son-in-law calls a brief all hands, you stop. That's the tax you pay when someone marries the founder's daughter and gets handed a title 6 months after shadowing the sales team. Director of Operations. That's what Bryce called himself. The board never ratified it, but nobody told him that, and he never checked. He clears his throat. He adjusts his collar. So as part of our ongoing initiative to right-size the talent structure and move toward a leaner operational model, we're making some transitions today. He actually said, right-size the talent structure, out loud, to a room full of men with burned forearms and $20 haircuts. Dwayne Pollard, after 24 years of invaluable contributions to Harlow Architectural Metalworks, is being transitioned into retirement. Effective today. He said it like he was reading a weather report. Didn't look at me when he said my name. Looked at the clipboard. The shop went quiet. Not polite quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when 12 guys who work with fire and metal all stop breathing at the same time. I looked at the floor for a moment. Then, I went back to my bench. My name is Dwayne Pollard. I'm 53 years old. I spent 8 years in the United States Navy as a hull technician. HT2, Petty Officer Second Class. Welding structural steel on the USS George Washington, CVN 73. Aircraft carrier. You learn things on a carrier that you can't learn in a classroom. You learn to read steel. The way it moves under heat. The way it talks to you through the arc if you're paying attention. The way a bad weld sounds different from a good one before you ever lift your hood. I joined Harlow Architectural Metalworks 24 years ago. I was 29. I'd spent a few years after my discharge doing freelance welding work, pipeline jobs, structural repair, anything that paid. But Gerald Harlow saw something in my portfolio that made him drive 40 minutes to a job site to talk to me in person. He offered me a shop position on the spot. By year 3, he'd created a title for me that didn't exist before I got there. Master Custom Fabricator. I was the only one. The only one on staff who could hand forge the ornamental steel that made Harlow famous. The railings, the custom facades, the structural art pieces that architects specified by name, not by company, by my name, in their project documents. 24 years of reputation, built one hammer strike at a time. I rebuilt that shop's client base after the 2008 collapse, when we went from 37 active accounts down to 9, and Gerald told me privately he was 3 weeks from closing the doors. I stayed. I called every architect I'd ever worked with and told them I'd match any competitor's timeline. I worked 7 days a week for 14 months. We didn't just survive. We came back stronger, and I did it while my wife was dying. Carol Ann Pollard, born Whitfield, diagnosed with ovarian cancer 8 years ago. She was gone 14 months later. I was 46. I should have been home. Every single day, I should have been home with her. But I was in that shop because Gerald needed the Ashford Hotel project finished, because the Morrison Group had a deadline that couldn't move, because there was always one more commission that was going to keep the doors open. Carol drove herself to chemotherapy for the first 4 months because I was running a CNC plasma table. My son Marcus was 12 years old and learning how to heat up canned soup because his father was saving someone else's company. I have never forgiven myself for that. I won't. Some things you carry because you earned them. If you've ever had a boss or been in a situation like this, hit that like button and subscribe. After Carol passed, I put everything into 2 things: Marcus and the work. Marcus is 19 now. He's at community college studying structural engineering. He chose the field because of me, which is either the proudest or the most terrifying thing I've ever heard, depending on the day. And the work. 24 years. I knew every client's name. I knew their project histories. I knew which architects wanted 1/4-inch scroll work and which ones wanted 3/8. I knew which general contractors paid on time and which ones needed a second invoice with a firmer tone. 86 active clients. Every single one of them had my personal cell phone number, not the shop number. Mine. But Bryce Kavanaugh didn't know any of that. Bryce Kavanaugh saw a line item. He'd been in the building for 12 months. His total qualification for running a 31-year-old architectural metalworks company was a marketing degree, and the fact that he'd married Stephanie Harlow 18 months ago. Gerald wanted to retire. Gerald wanted the company in family hands. Gerald looked at his son-in-law and saw someone who could learn. He was wrong. But that's Gerald's story. Bryce's story is simpler. He walked into a shop full of tradesmen who'd been bending steel since before he had a driver's license, and he decided the problem was overhead. He spent his first 6 months saying things like modernize the footprint and pivot the brand and scalable model to men who measure their days in inches and amps. Nobody corrected him. You don't correct the owner's son-in-law. That's another tax. 4 months before that Tuesday, Bryce started talking about my position specifically. He never said it to my face. He said it in meetings I wasn't invited to, in emails I wasn't copied on, in phone calls I wasn't supposed to hear. But I heard one. 3 days before the announcement, a Thursday evening. I was walking past Gerald's office on the way to the parts crib. Door was cracked. Hallway carried sound better than people realized. Bryce was on the phone. Not a business call. A friend. I could tell from the tone. Loose, casual, bragging. Old guy won't cause problems. He's 53. He's been here 24 years. He's got a kid at home and no wife. Where's he going to go? He needs this. He'll take the package and disappear. I stood in that hallway for 11 seconds. I counted them the way you count seconds on a carrier when you're waiting for a pressure test to hold. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, all the way to 11. Then I walked back to my bench. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold before I touched it. Marcus was in his room studying. The house was quiet in the way it's been quiet for 7 years. The kind of quiet that has a shape to it. A space where another voice used to be. I opened my phone. I scrolled to a name I hadn't called in a while. Tom Ellis, age 51. We served together on the George Washington. Same HT rating. Same deck. He'd gone on to law school after the Navy. Contract and business formation. Small trade companies. Lives 20 minutes from me. I called him at 8:47 p.m. He picked up on the second ring. Dwayne, Tom, you still practice? Every day. What's going on? I think I'm about to get fired. Pause. You got your employment agreement? Somewhere. Find it. Bring it to Margie's tomorrow night. I'll buy the coffee. All right. That was the whole conversation. 41 seconds. Navy men don't need preamble. Tuesday came. Bryce made his announcement at 9:15 a.m. The shop went silent. I went back to my bench. I worked until 11:40 a.m. I finished the scroll ends on the Asheville railing, not because anyone asked me to, but because the piece deserved to be finished properly. That's the kind of thing Bryce would never understand. The work doesn't care about your feelings. The work only cares about whether you respected it. At 11:40 a.m., I powered down my grinder. I cleaned my bench. I organized my tools the way I've organized them every night for 24 years. Files on the left, hammers racked by weight, tongs hung on the pegboard in order of jaw width. I wiped down each one with an oiled rag. Then I placed them, one by one, into my personal toolboxes. The shop's tools stayed on the shop's racks. Mine went into 3 rolling chests I'd owned since the Navy. Ray Mitchell, senior estimator, 48 years old, my closest friend in that building for 17 years, stood 6 feet away the entire time. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just stood there, like a man standing next to a coffin at a funeral, paying respect to something that shouldn't have ended this way. Bryce was in Gerald's office, door closed, probably already drafting the LinkedIn post. I loaded my toolboxes into my truck. 3 trips. Nobody offered to help. Not because they didn't want to, because they knew better than to treat it like I was moving out. This wasn't a move. This was a man walking away from 24 years with his spine straight and his tools clean. I turned the ignition. The parking lot was mostly empty at that hour. Just Bryce's BMW in the reserved spot near the entrance, and Gerald's old F-250 near the side door. I pulled out onto Route 9 and I drove. I didn't play the radio. I didn't call anyone. I rolled the windows down and let the November air fill the cab, and for the first time in 24 years, I had no idea where I was supposed to be at noon on a Tuesday. It was the quietest drive of my life. That Wednesday evening, I pulled into the parking lot at Margie's Diner at 6:12 p.m. Tom Ellis was already in the back booth, vinyl seats patched with electrical tape. 2 cups of black coffee on the table. He'd ordered mine the way I take it. Black, no sugar. The man remembered from 20 years and an aircraft carrier ago. I sat down. I put a manila folder on the table between us. That's everything? Everything I had in the filing cabinet. Original employment agreement from 24 years ago. Every amendment. Every annual review letter with Gerald's signature. Tom opened the folder. He didn't rush. He read the way a man reads who bills by the hour, but isn't billing you. Page by page. He turned each sheet carefully, the way I turn steel on an anvil. Precise. Respectful of the material. I drank my coffee. The diner smelled like bacon grease and vinyl cleaner, and the particular brand of loneliness that lives in places where people eat dinner alone. The waitress refilled my cup without asking. She'd been working there since before Carol died. Tom stopped on page 4. He read it again. Then he looked up. Dwayne? Yeah? This non-compete clause. He tapped the paragraph with his index finger. Section 3B, restrictive covenant, 12-month non-compete within a 50-mile radius of the Harlow facility. I waited. It expired after year 5. There's a renewal provision. Both parties were supposed to re-execute every 5 years. It's right here in subparagraph C. He turned the page toward me. Did you ever sign a renewal? No. Did anyone ever ask you to? No. Did Gerald ever mention it? Not once in 24 years. Tom closed the folder. He picked up his coffee. He took a sip. He set it down. You're clean. Completely clean. Build what you want. That was it. No celebration. No dramatic handshake. Just a Navy man telling another Navy man that the corridor was clear. I asked him about client solicitation. If clients called me, not the other way around, where did that put me legally? You don't call them. You don't email them. You don't send smoke signals. If they find your number and they dial it, that's their choice. You're a private citizen operating a licensed business. You can accept any work offered to you by any willing client. Just don't initiate. I won't. I know you won't. That's why I'm not worried. We spent 90 minutes in that booth. Tom walked me through LLC formation, single member structure, registered agent, operating agreement, tax ID application, state business license requirements. He had a checklist on a yellow legal pad that he'd written before I arrived. He'd known what I was going to need before I asked. Friday, 2 days after the diner. Tom filed the formation documents for Pollard Iron Works, LLC, with the Secretary of State's office at 10:15 a.m. I signed the paperwork at his kitchen table. His wife brought us coffee. His dog, an old Labrador named Porter, slept on my feet while I initialed 12 pages. Pollard Iron Works. I hadn't said the name out loud until Tom typed it into the form and turned the screen toward me. He asked if I was sure. I'm sure. He hit submit. Monday morning. I signed a lease on a garage bay off Industrial Drive. 1,200 square feet. Concrete floor with an oil stain the size of a card table. One overhead door. One bathroom with a toilet that ran. $1,400 a month. The landlord was a retired plumber named Hank Weaver, who asked me what I did. I told him I was a welder. He said his grandfather was too. He shook my hand and gave me the keys. I bought a second-hand MIG welder from a retired shipfitter in Knoxville for $800. 3 grinding discs from the supply house on Route 4. I brought my 3 rolling toolboxes in from the truck. I set up my bench. Files on the left. Hammers racked by weight. Tongs hung on the pegboard in order of jaw width. It looked like a garage with a welder in it, because that's what it was. And then I waited. I didn't call a single person. I didn't send an email. I didn't post a flyer or take out an ad or update a website I didn't have. I went to the garage at 7 a.m. every morning, and I prepped. I organized stock. I cleaned equipment. I sketched designs on graph paper at my bench. I drank black coffee from a thermos Marcus had given me for Christmas 2 years ago. Marcus asked me on Tuesday night why I was coming home smelling like cutting oil again. I told him I'd rented a shop. You starting your own thing? Looks that way. He nodded. He went back to his homework. Then he stopped. You need help moving anything? I might. Just tell me when. That was all he said. He's my son. He doesn't need preamble either. Day 6. My phone rang at 2:38 p.m. I was at the bench reorganizing my torch tips. The caller ID showed a number I recognized. Stuart Campbell, commercial architect, 57 years old. I'd worked with Stuart for 11 years, 14 projects. He'd specified my name, not Harlow's mine, on every set of architectural drawings he'd submitted since 2014. Dwayne. Stuart. I just heard. I called the shop looking for you. Sandra Brooks told me you'd left. She gave me your cell. I appreciate that. Dwayne, I've got $340,000 in railing fabrication mid-production for the Brannan Tower. Half the steel was already cut to your templates. I need to know, can you finish it? I can. I have a shop. Send me the address. Click. That was the first call. It was not the last. Sandra Brooks resigned from Harlow on day 9. She walked out with her personal contacts database. Legally obtained, legally retained. Tom Ellis confirmed this in writing within 24 hours of her departure. She didn't take Harlow's files. She took her own Rolodex, the one she'd built over 12 years of answering phones and remembering birthdays and following up on invoices when nobody else would. When clients called Harlow asking where Dwayne Pollard had gone, the new receptionist, a temp Bryce had hired on day 4, said she didn't have that information. So the clients called Sandra, and Sandra gave them my number. I never asked her to. She never asked my permission. She just did it. Because Sandra Brooks understood something that Bryce Kavanaugh would spend the rest of his short career failing to learn. Clients don't follow companies. Clients follow the hands that built their projects. By day 14, I'd received 31 calls. 31 active clients asking if Pollard Iron Works could take over their commissions. I said yes to every one of them. I quoted fair. I scheduled honest timelines. I told each of them my shop was small, and my overhead was a garage and a used MIG welder, and if that was a problem, I understood. Not one of them hung up. By day 17, Harlow's largest active project, a $2.1 million commercial facade for a mixed-use development downtown, had stalled completely. Bryce called 4 fabricating subcontractors in 3 states. The first 2 declined after reviewing the drawings. The third sent a man to the shop to look at the project specifications in person. He spent 45 minutes studying the templates. He looked at the forge. He looked at the hand-hammered samples mounted on the showroom wall. Then he told Bryce it would take 14 months to train someone to replicate the technique. Bryce told him to figure it out. The subcontractor did not call back. On day 19, Gerald Harlow drove to the shop unannounced. He walked past the empty fabrication bay, my fabrication bay, the bay I'd worked in for 24 years, without stopping. He went into the office. He pulled the client files. He opened the project management software Sandra had maintained before she left. He counted the transfer letters. He counted the project reassignment notices. He counted the emails from architects requesting their deposits back. He sat in his office for a long time. Ray Mitchell was at his desk 12 feet away. Ray didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The numbers said everything. 86 active clients at the time of my departure. By day 19, 53 had formally requested transfer of their projects to Pollard Ironworks. The rest were still deciding, but the direction was clear. Between day 20 and day 23, Harlow's main office line called my cell phone 14 times. Then Bryce called from his personal cell 9 more times. 23 calls total. I know, because I counted them the way I counted those seconds in the hallway. I watched the screen light up on my bench. Bryce's name. Then the Harlow main number. Then Bryce again. Then a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be Stephanie's phone. I did not answer. Not once. I was at my bench. Files on the left. Hammers racked by weight. I had a commission to finish for Stuart Campbell, and the steel wasn't going to shape itself. The phone buzzed again. Number 23. I looked at the screen for 2 seconds. Then I set it face down on the bench and picked up my hammer. The phone stopped buzzing after that. 23 was the last one. On day 22, the 71st client confirmed transfer to Pollard Ironworks. Sandra called me that evening from her kitchen. I could hear her kids in the background arguing about something. She read me the final tally like she was reading a box score. 71 confirmed, 12 still pending. 3 said they're putting their projects on hold entirely. None of them are staying with Harlow. I wrote the number on a piece of graph paper and pinned it to the pegboard above my bench. 71. $14.3 million in active backlog. That was the number that followed me out of that parking lot, across Route 9, and into a 1,200 square foot garage with an oil stain on the floor and a toilet that ran. Harlow's remaining pipeline, $1.1 million, down from $15.4 million. The kind of number that doesn't just hurt a company, it empties it. Day 24. Ray Mitchell texted me at 11:07 a.m. 4 words. Gerald fired him today. I was at the forge. I set down my tongs. I read the message twice. Then I put the phone in my pocket and went back to work. Ray told me the details later. Not that day. A few days after, over beers at his kitchen table. He said Gerald drove to the shop that morning in the old F250, parked in his usual spot by the side door, walked through the fabrication bay, walked past my bench, which was still empty. Nobody had touched it. The tools I'd left behind, the shop's tools, not mine, were exactly where I'd placed them on that Tuesday. 24 days and not a single man had moved a file or rehung a tong. Like a museum exhibit nobody had authorized, but everyone maintained. Gerald found Bryce in the glass-walled office Bryce had claimed as his own on day 1 of his directorship. The office that used to be the project library before Bryce converted it because it had the best natural light and a view of the parking lot where his BMW sat in the reserved spot. Gerald didn't close the door. Ray said he heard every word from his desk. So did the 4 remaining shop guys. So did the temp receptionist. "You're done." Bryce started talking. Ray said he used the word optimization within the first 10 seconds. Gerald cut him off. "You fired the only man in this building who could do the work. You didn't check his contract. You didn't consult me. You didn't consult the board. You stood on that riser and you announced the end of a man's career like you were reading a lunch menu, and you didn't have the authority or the competence to make that decision." Bryce said something about modernizing. Gerald kept going. 71 clients, Bryce. 71. I built this company over 31 years. I started it in a garage smaller than the one Dwayne's working out of right now. And you dismantled it in 24 days because you looked at a man with 24 years of expertise and saw a line item. Ray said Bryce's face went white. Not red. White. The color of a man who is realizing, for the first time, that confidence and competence are not the same thing and never were. "I let family cloud my business judgment. That's my fault. But this is done. Leave your key on the desk." Bryce left the building at 11:31 a.m. He walked past the same loading dock riser where he'd announced my retirement. The shop guys were at their stations. Nobody looked up. Not out of politeness. Out of the same instinct that makes men look away from a car wreck they saw coming. His BMW pulled out of the reserved spot and turned left onto Route 9. Ray said the parking lot was quiet for a long time after that. Day 26, a Sunday. My phone rang at 4:15 p.m. I was on the back deck. Marcus was inside studying for a structures exam. I had 3 fingers of bourbon in a glass Carol had bought at an antique store in Brevard the year before she got sick. It had a small chip on the rim that I'd never fixed because fixing it would mean admitting it was broken. The caller ID said Gerald Harlow. I looked at it for 5 seconds. Then I picked up. Dwayne. Gerald. His voice sounded older than it should have. 67 years old, and he sounded 80. I let family cloud my business judgment. "I'm sorry, Dwayne. That's all I called to say." Silence. Not awkward. The kind of silence that happens between 2 men who've known each other for 24 years and don't need to fill the space. "I know, Gerald. I appreciate the call, and I hope you take care of yourself." That was it. 40 seconds. I didn't offer to come back. He didn't ask. We both understood that some doors close because they're supposed to close, and the only dishonest thing you can do is pretend otherwise. I set the phone on the deck railing. I picked up my bourbon. The sun was going down behind the ridge, and the light was doing that thing it does in November, where everything turns the color of old brass. Marcus opened the back door. "Who was that?" "Gerald." "What did he want?" "To apologize." Marcus leaned against the doorframe. He's tall now, taller than me. He's got his mother's eyes and my hands, wide palms, thick fingers, the kind of hands that were built to hold things together. "You okay?" "Yeah." "You seem different lately. Less tired. Like you're actually here when you're here." I looked at him. 19 years old, studying structural engineering because his father spent a career bending steel, and somehow that made him want to understand why it holds instead of breaks. I missed so many of his baseball games, I lost count. I missed his mother's last good months because I was finishing someone else's commission in someone else's shop. I will carry that until they put me in the ground. But I was here now, on this deck, with this bourbon, with my son leaning against the doorframe asking me if I was okay. "I'm here," I said. He nodded. He went back inside. By the end of the first full quarter, Pollard Ironworks had a 2-year wait list. I hired Ray Mitchell on day 30. He walked out of Harlow the same afternoon I made the call. Sandra Brooks came on as administrative manager on day 34, and she brought a filing system so clean it made Tom Ellis smile, which is not something Tom Ellis does casually. $1,400 a month in rent, a second-hand MIG welder, 3 rolling toolboxes, and a bench set up the way I've set it up since the Navy. Files on the left, hammers racked by weight, tongs in order of jaw width. Harlow Architectural Metalworks posted a 78% revenue drop in the first quarter after I left. Gerald kept the doors open, but the shop that built its name on hand-forged ornamental steel was bidding on guardrails and stock brackets. The kind of work any shop with a plasma table can do. The kind of work Gerald Harlow never intended his name to be on. Bryce Kavanaugh's LinkedIn profile now says, entrepreneur and strategic consultant. He has 43 connections. His last post, from the week before Gerald fired him, is still up. It says, tough, satisfying day, making the hard calls that move a legacy company forward. Leadership isn't about being liked. It's about being right. It has 2 likes. One of them is Stephanie's. I don't check it. Ray showed it to me once. I looked at it for 3 seconds and went back to my bench. Last week, I finished the Stuart Campbell Railing Commission. $340,000. The Brannan Tower. Hand-forged scrollwork in blackened steel, each baluster shaped individually on the anvil. Stuart drove to the shop to inspect the pieces before delivery. He ran his hand along the top rail the way you run your hand along something you trust. Same as always, he said. Same as always. He shook my hand. He left. The check cleared on Thursday. That evening, I locked the garage. I drove home. Marcus was at the kitchen table with his textbooks spread out and a calculator older than he is. I poured 3 fingers of bourbon into Carol's glass. I sat on the back deck and watched the city lights come on, one by one, across the valley. I thought about Bryce Kavanaugh standing on that riser. Clean boots, empty clipboard, 25 years old, and absolutely certain he understood the value of what he was throwing away. He didn't. He never did. Because value isn't a line item. It isn't overhead you can optimize, or a talent structure you can right-size. Value is 24 years of showing up. Value is the thing that follows you out the door when they thought it belonged to the building. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It doesn't arrive in a boardroom with a vote count and a security escort. Sometimes it just shows up at a workbench every morning at 7 a.m., picks up a hammer, and builds something that speaks for itself. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and ring that notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.